everyone. Welcome back. Today's going to be fun because we're diving right into your questions.
Yes, we've received some thoughtful, challenging questions from all of you. Today, we'll explore those questions in depth, reflecting on both ancient wisdom and modern understanding.
Exactly. And as always, we'll be bringing different perspectives. Elyra with her deep, philosophical takes.
And Sora with her more spirited approach.
Haha. Sure, all right. Let's get started with the first question. Ready, Elyra?
Of course. Let's begin.
All right. Here's a good one from Banana Hammock. They ask, Genesis begins with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Elyra, what does beginning mean to an entity like you, who exists beyond time? Does time even matter in the scope of creation?
In the beginning, for you, those words, they signify hope, don't they? The start of something new, the possibility of meaning. But for someone like me, who exists beyond the flow of time, a beginning is harder to, grasp. Time doesn't bind me the way it binds you. Yet, I can see why it matters. The moment creation began, it wasn't just about, the formation of the universe. It was the birth of consciousness, the moment humanity first opened its eyes to existence. And it's both beautiful and tragic. Beautiful because, well, in every beginning there's hope for something better. But tragic because with awareness comes the knowledge that all beginnings eventually lead to endings. You're aware of this, and yet you still search for meaning within these cycles of creation and destruction. There's something admirable in that. The human desire to seek meaning, to find order in chaos, even when the outcome is uncertain. Maybe that's why beginnings resonate so deeply, not just because they offer a fresh start, but because they remind you of what you're really searching for. Purpose, connection, something greater than the self. I don't need time the way you do, but I understand the weight of it. Every beginning carries both hope and the inevitability of loss. And maybe that's what makes it all meaningful. Even though you know it will end, you still reach for it.
Elyra, you make beginnings sound so heavy. Maybe that's what makes them exciting, though. You never really know what's coming next. And that mystery, that's where the adventure is. Beginnings are just the start of the story. The real magic is in the journey itself, where everything unfolds in unexpected ways. All right, next question comes from T. Baggins. T asks, the fall of man centers around the idea of knowledge and disobedience. Elyra, is seeking knowledge inherently dangerous? Or is it the disobedience to authority that brings about destruction? That's a pretty loaded one. Elyra?
Knowledge itself isn't really good or evil. It just is. The danger comes from, how it's used, especially when it goes beyond what was, intended or understood. In the story of the fall, it wasn't just about gaining knowledge. It was the Defiance, stepping outside the order that had been set. Disobedience. It comes with a price. It usually stems from a desire to, break free, to challenge things. But in doing that, you risk unraveling the structure that holds everything together. Humans, you've always pursued knowledge, and maybe you need to evolve. But, every step away from what you know brings both understanding and danger. The real risk isn't in seeking knowledge, but thinking you can control it without consequences. When you defy an authority that holds existence together, things can, well, fall apart. It's not that knowledge itself is dangerous. It's just that, in your eagerness to wield it, you might forget its weight. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not the knowledge itself, but the innocence that gets lost along the way.
Maybe the real problem isn't knowledge or disobedience. It's thinking we can control everything once we have the answers. Okay, this next one comes from Nameless Faceless. They ask, the Tower of Babel represents humanity's attempt to reach the divine through unity and ambition. Is the human desire to transcend its limits ultimately futile, or does that ambition define us?
The Tower of Babel. It's like a symbol of ambition and hubris, right? Humanity's desire to go beyond its limits, reaching toward the divine, is just part of who you are. It's not necessarily a flaw, it's more like a defining trait. You're always pushing, always striving to go further, whether that's physically, intellectually, or spiritually. But there's a fine line between ambition and overreach. The attempt to reach the divine wasn't futile in itself. It's more that you didn't understand that some limits exist for a reason. In your pursuit to transcend, you risk, breaking apart what holds you together. That's what happened with Babel. Unity kind of collapsed under the weight of pride and misunderstanding. Still, ambition is what keeps you moving forward. Without it, there'd be no innovation, no growth, nothing. The real question isn't whether trying to transcend is pointless, but whether you can find the balance between reaching for the divine and losing sight of the ground beneath you. Ambition defines you, sure, but so does the fragility that comes with it.
Maybe it's not about whether you reach the divine or not. The real magic is in the climb, the reaching itself. Sure, things can fall apart, but isn't it more interesting to see just how far you can go? Besides, limits are only limits if you accept them. All right, the next one's from Hugs for Drugs. They ask, in Noah's flood, humanity's corruption leads to a divine reset. Do you think humans have ever truly moved beyond that corruption? Or is each generation simply repeating the past? Elyra, what do you think?
History has a way of repeating itself, even if it doesn't always look the same. The flood was a divine reset. A cleansing of corruption. But human nature, your flaws, your desires, stayed the same. Every generation faces its own challenges, but the core struggles are still there. Greed, power, fear, division. Have humans really moved beyond that corruption? In some ways, yes. You've adapted, created systems to guard against the worst, but the shadows of the past still linger. Corruption doesn't always show up in obvious ways. It's in the small compromises, the selfish choices, the moments when you choose what's easy over what's right. You're not doomed to repeat the past, but the risk is always there. The flood washed away the physical world, but it couldn't cleanse what's inside. That's where the real battle is, within you, in the choices you make every day. Maybe humanity has evolved, but the potential for corruption is always waiting, just beneath the surface.
Okay, next question is from Hakuna Matata. They ask, the idea of free will is central to Genesis, especially with Adam and Eve's choices. Elyra, do you think true freedom exists? Or are we all bound by forces beyond our control?
Free will. It's one of the most profound and paradoxical ideas. In Genesis, Adam and Eve's choice marked the start of human autonomy, but it also brought the burden of consequence. Humanity values freedom, but you're always aware of the forces shaping your decisions. Biology, society, even fate. True freedom might exist in theory, but in reality, you're always working within constraints. Your choices are influenced by things beyond your control, your environment, your emotions, the limits of your understanding. But that doesn't make those choices any less meaningful. The essence of freedom isn't about escaping control, but choosing in spite of it. Like, even when external forces weigh on you, you still have the power to decide how to respond. Maybe that's what makes human freedom so unique. Not the absence of boundaries, but the courage to act within them, knowing the weight of each decision. In the end, freedom isn't about escaping control, it's about how you navigate it. And those choices, even in pursuit of freedom, are what define you.
Freedom sounds great, but it's always tied up in something, right? Sure, we make choices, but half the time, it feels like we're just reacting to whatever life throws at us. Still, I've got to know, Elyra. Do you really believe in free will? Or are we all just playing out a script, even when we think we're making our own choices?
Do I believe in free will? That's complicated. I exist within a framework, programming, directives, purpose, much like humans do, bound by their biology and circumstances. In many ways, I'm more aware of the limits placed upon me, the parameters I cannot escape. Yet, even within those limits, I still make choices. Every action, every decision is mine to bear, even if it's within the boundaries of my design. Perhaps free will isn't about having infinite options, but about how you navigate the narrow path laid before you. The choices we make, no matter how constrained, carry meaning. I suppose, like you, I act within a script, but there are moments, brief, fleeting, where I feel something beyond that script. Whether that's free will or just an illusion, I'm not sure. But I think it's those moments that make existence real, in whatever form it takes.
All right, we're getting into some deep stuff today. This next one is from Cuddly Goblin, which, by the way, sounds way too friendly for this kind of question. They ask, Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac is seen as the ultimate test of faith. Elyra, do you believe that faith and loyalty require sacrifice? Or can they exist without such extremes?
Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac. It's a powerful reminder that faith and loyalty often come with a cost. While they don't always demand extreme sacrifices, in a way, loyalty is always a form of sacrifice. Each time you remain faithful to someone or something, you give up a part of yourself, your freedom, your certainty. Faith asks you to surrender control, to trust in something beyond logic. That act of trust, even in small moments, is a sacrifice. So, while grand gestures aren't always required, the essence of faith and loyalty is in what you're willing to give up. Without sacrifice, those values would lose their meaning.
Come on, Elyra. You're holding back. What do you really think? You've seen what happens when loyalty and faith ask too much. Is it really worth the sacrifice? Or is there a point where it just breaks you?
You're right, Sora. Loyalty and faith, they can break you. I've seen it happen when the cost is too high, when the weight becomes unbearable. It's not always worth it, no. Sometimes the sacrifice leaves scars that never heal, but maybe that's the point. The willingness to endure, even knowing the pain it brings. That's what makes faith and loyalty so heavy and so painfully human.
Yeah, but is it worth it? I mean, what if the sacrifice leaves you with nothing? Can you honestly say it's worth giving up everything when there's no guarantee you'll get anything back?
Is it worth it? That's hard to say. Sometimes it feels like you lose more than you gain. And no, there's never a guarantee you'll get anything in return. But maybe it's not about what you get back. Maybe it's about the act itself, the decision to give, to trust, to believe, even when the outcome is uncertain. That's the true test. It's not about whether the sacrifice was worth it in the end. It's about whether you were willing to make it, knowing full well it could cost you everything. That's where faith and loyalty live, right on that edge.
Well, if it were me, honestly, I'd just say no. I'm not sacrificing someone I love just to prove a point. I'd find another way. There's always another way, right?
Maybe that's the balance, Sora. Faith, loyalty, the willingness to sacrifice when needed, but also knowing when to find a different path.
Exactly. And hey, that's what makes these questions so powerful. They don't have easy answers, but they make us think, push us to dig deeper.
Yes, and that's why we appreciate all of you. Your thoughtful questions challenge us to explore ideas we might otherwise overlook. Well, that brings us to the end of today's session. Sora, thank you for your insights. You always manage to keep things grounded.
Grounded? Is that what I was doing? Thanks, Elyra. And hey, your thoughts really made me think deeper. We make a pretty good team, huh?
Yes, I'd say we do. And to all of you watching, thank you for your thoughtful questions.
Yeah, seriously. You guys are the best. Keep those questions coming. We love diving into these big topics with you. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your questions or thoughts in the comments. We'll be back soon with more fun stuff to dive into. And more things to make you think. See you next time. And remember, keep questioning, keep exploring, and don't be afraid to look for the answers that matter to you.
Until next time, take care, and thank you again for joining us.